Hi everyone, and thank you very much for coming along today. I'm Emma Jones, and I'm currently a lecturer on the Product and Furniture Design course at Birmingham City University, just across the road. So this is very much so an emerging research project, and it is an exploration into the application of design thinking and practice in supporting ecological education in the UK. So before going any further, I just sort of wanted to draw your attention to a couple of keywords in these definitions here. Most of us in the room probably know what pedagogy is, but within this research, I want you to sort of consider the emphasis on the social and the political factors in the development of learners. And within the context of this research, ecological consciousness is defined as awareness, understanding, and responsiveness towards the biophysical environment, including human interactions and effects. And this is an abbreviated definition pretty widely used within academia at the moment when discussing human awareness and understanding of the ecological systems on Earth. And the importance of this is that it highlights our place as humans within the natural world, as opposed to being something separate or removed from nature. So the context of this research dates back to 2018. We're all fairly familiar with the story of Greta Thunberg, starting her school strikes to protest the lack of action on climate change. And as we know, others soon joined her, and they formed the Fridays for Future movement, where every Friday students were leaving school to join in climate action demonstrations. And in 2019, over 4 million people attended the global strikes in September, and this was the largest climate strikes in history. As we know, although it was initially quite controversial, she sparked an ongoing worldwide climate activist movement. And as my own sort of personal involvement in these climate protests, and as I sort of researched more into the ecological crisis, I realised a very obvious juxtaposition between my career as a designer in the design and production of made objects and the preservation and restoration of the planet. And so this is where I was really turning to this idea of design activism, so looking at as how creative disciplines we can utilise our skill set as creatives to help resolve the issues that have arisen as a result of the ecological crisis. Okay, so discovered sort of leading on from these youth climate strikes was Teach the Future, and this is another student-led campaign, and they are calling for educational reform in England specifically, where learning will reflect the future environmental challenges that young people are very likely to face. And Teach the Future are campaigning for the climate crisis to be taught across all levels of the educational system, so from primary into higher education. And they argue that existing UK curriculums are insufficiently meeting the needs of a generation facing predicted ecological disaster. And another sort of additional key aim of this campaign is just in general raising the profile of climate education. And they're doing a lot with working with teachers from across the UK to understand what the current issues are and how best to solve them. So this was sort of a key link liaising within my research. So they've conducted national research and have found that the climate crisis is only taught briefly in a couple of optional subjects, particularly in sort of primary and secondary education, and then often where it is taught, it's not taught to a well enough standard. So for example, only 4% of students feel that they know a lot about climate change, and 70% of teachers feel like they haven't received adequate training to educate students about the climate crisis. And with sort of 68% of students saying that they want to learn more about ecological issues, it does sort of suggest that there is enough demand for educational reform in this area. I've got notes because otherwise I will ramble on. I practice this and it will go on forever. So, as sort of demonstrated within UN sustainability goals, education is classed as being integral in raising the awareness of ecological issues, and also, this can be used to guide society to adopt new sustainable behaviours. And although sort of within this research project, education is discussed within the context of school-age learners, we all know learning is like a never-ending process, and I really feel that further research could and should explore the opportunities for supporting the ecological education of more mature learners too. So this research, aims, yes. So the aim of this study was to explore a new opportunity for sustainable design practice, and this was through the development of ecologically driven pedagogical tools and toys. It's very much a theoretical study, and it explores if design thinking and practice can viably support the ecological education of young people within the UK. So the research started with, again, a very sort of comprehensive literature review. This was done just to establish existing research and precedents within this subject area, and there's actually very limited results that focused solely on the potential of design thinking and practice to support and transform ecological education. So sort of as a result, this sort of literature review drew upon 3 key areas of ecological issues: sustainable design practice and pedagogy. So, yeah, I was looking at books, papers, scientific reports, government curriculums, conference papers, conference recordings, and these were initially used just to help try and establish that viable research question within this area. And the sort of key driver in my research was that primary research undertaken to provide further context for the need of educational reform from both student and from educator perspectives as well. And a series of interviews were designed to provide deeper understanding of what is currently taught across the curriculum and what resources are currently available. So these are some of the key findings from the interviews and correspondence with teachers from all across the UK from a range of backgrounds. So they state there is an increased interest in environmental issues across all age groups, and really positively, recently in GCSE and A-level geography, recent changes now include far greater reference to themes related to sustainability. Teachers do believe across the board that young people should be educated on climate change, as it's a key issue and it does lead on to further environmental discussions. And I think that additionally, just sort of discussing the overarching concept of sustainability communicates what individuals can do to help lead more sustainable lifestyles, and through this children can learn how their own individual actions can make a difference. And across the whole curriculum, there are very limited ecological educational resources available. So this is sort of an area where there is plenty of opportunity for development. And because of a lack of provision at these stages, the teachers sort of advise that Key Stage 1 to Key Stage 3 would benefit more from a physical tool for ecological education. So sort of following on from speaking with teachers within the current educational system, I also conducted online interviews via the social media platform Reddit, and these were conducted with a self-named group of climate skeptics. And the intention of this was to provide alternative perspectives on the improvement and increased presence of ecological education within schools. So I'm just going to quickly flip through these because there's quite a bit to read. There was 56 responses to this interview that I conducted, but this word cloud produced sort of demonstrates some of the key themes that arose from this discussion. And this included, ecological education being compared to indoctrination. There was lots of concern expressed for free thinking or critical thinking, and that ecological science and climate change is alarmism, a hoax, junk science, and so on. But yeah, so these are sort of the key themes that were derived from this research. And although, like, many of them are opposed to educating children about ecological issues and compare ecological education with political indoctrination, the group did generally agree that children should be taught to care for their surroundings. And additionally, sort of the idea of teaching young people how, not what to think, supports that promotion of critical thinking skills, and this complements sort of both STEAM and ecological education. So all of the sort of themes mentioned there then needed to be utilised in the development of an ecological educational object, so applying that theory and what was learned within the design process to produce a physical outcome that could then be tested with young people. There is an overlap with STEAM education, so many of the themes and findings from the research align with the benefits of STEAM education and intended student qualities of those who engage with it. For example, thinking outside the box, working collaboratively, and being increasingly curious about the world around them and feeling like they have the skill set in order to change it for the better. So, as part of my research, learning styles were explored, and with that intention of through thoughtful design that accommodates several different styles of learning, it's intended that more students will experience a productive, rewarding learning experience. And as this theory is sort of heavily influenced by teaching practices, Piaget's developmental stage theory was also used to align the complexity of an educational product to the developmental stages of children in key stage 1 to 3 to try and establish that correct level of difficulty and engagement. So sort of summarising that design framework, the output obviously has to be functional, it has to benefit ecological education, and it needs to engage the intended target audience, but also aligning with sustainable design principles as well. And despite controversial opinions raised by the climate skeptics, valid points were raised regarding the shaping of future minds. So any products which support ecological education must not solely communicate facts or knowledge, it must invoke a culture of open-mindedness, exploring multiple perspectives and encouraging those to formulate their own conclusions. Designed using this framework was an educational, ecologically themed game for children aged 7 to 11. This is called Bees, Trees and Factories. And the game engages children with a range of environmental topics through a challenging and entertaining balancing game, accompanied by colourful, informative playing cards, and it's designed to support parents and teachers by creating conversations around ecological issues, and it intends to encourage deeper thinking skills, and it lends itself to being flexible and adaptable to different age groups and different learning scenarios. So we're going to go past that. But some of the challenges faced in designing an object of this nature was this game was pitched to 8 to 10 of the UK's biggest toy and game manufacturers last year, and also invited to pitch as a response to a lot of European toy and game brands manufacturing toys using timbers and alternative materials to combat plastic waste. And there's also an increased number of educational kits being launched designed to foster imagination and generate interest in nature through educational play. But despite the supposed shift towards sustainability within the toy industry, large toy and game companies will not take on environmentally themed products. And their key concern is that environmental themes are believed to be aligned with left-wing politics. And these brands are really concerned that they'll isolate a large portion of their market by releasing a product with these themes. But interestingly, small to medium business are much more willing to collaborate and launch environmentally themed games. We're going to skip that one. And finally, so as mentioned, this research and the resulting children's games are very much in their early stages, and there's a lot more I'd like to do with this. So the initial priority is producing enough prototypes to then go on and establish partners for further testing in both home and school environments. And through that continued testing, it will push further design refinements, not just to the physical game, but also the rule set and the educational content. And long term, it would be really great to have these produced in batch. And personally, this is just an area that I find really interesting, and I'll just be sort of carrying on exploring the various design possibilities, but also exploring the theory that's been covered, but wanting to place further emphasis on that STEAM, and particularly the arts element within STEAM as well. Thank you for listening and for bearing with me with the technical issues. Thank you very much.
There is another session starting at 12:30. If there are any very quick questions for Emma, I mean, that's a really, fascinating and terrifying. Some of the, I don't know, everyone else was thinking about what educators are thinking, and anyway, so it seems like there's a load of I should say I teach marketing, so I feel responsible for quite a lot of that, and how we go about changing attitudes and consumer behaviour and those kinds of things needs to happen a bit higher up at older age groups. Are there any? Go on, yes. Hold on.
I was going to say, hypothetically, let's say for everyone all the schools start doing that tomorrow. Hypothetically, if, everything went as planned, what effects would that have? Like, ideally, what effects would the program do?
Ideally, it's to, thinking about the idea of children building habits from a young age, it's that intention that the younger you start to communicate these things to children, the earlier on they can start to build habits and behaviours that are beneficial for the environment, and sort of they're aware of choosing between different options and different things that can allow them to reduce their environmental impact. That's sort of the end goal, is making them aware of environmental issues, but also being aware of the options that they can take to change their behaviour and their lifestyle to support the planet as well.
Thank you. On Reddit, a lot of comments were saying that it's political, and obviously that's not literally true because obviously it's just a planet you live
It's
there.
hard to remove it.
But
I wanted to touch more on that, but yeah,
you really, it's not something you can remove.
It's one of the challenges that I sort of think about is that you cannot make ecological issues or environmental issues apolitical because of society's association of environmental issues being aligned with. I mean, they're true. It is sort of aligned, but it shouldn't be. It should be something that everybody's concerned about as opposed to just.
Yeah. I think it's okay though. It's okay for it to be political. Realistically, if I'm being honest, the companies are the problem, not the people. So unless you, like, maybe when everyone touches high school, that's when you say, okay, you got to start protesting. That's on the world.
Yeah, so I feel, as a marketer, I feel really responsible for some of that. Yeah, there's a lot of work to be done. I did have a final question. I don't know if anyone else is thinking about, because there's a lot around climate anxiety as well in young people, but I think there is something around maybe how you can kind of teach hope as well.
Yeah, and that's sort of the whole idea in teaching something that isn't all doom and gloom. It's something that's put into that game format that doesn't trivialise the issues, but it does so in a way that opens up conversation about what's currently happening. And the next sort of phase of my research is looking at getting kids involved in designing solutions, even as silly and wild and wacky as they are, designing solutions to some of the problems that we face. And that actually getting them involved in that process helps them to feel like things can change and they can be sort of activators of that change as well.
I think that's brilliant. I think that because that hope and that sense that you have,
it's very much needed.
You're able to actually kind of have some impact for the better.
Yeah,
it's really important.
It's really important, especially in young people. Yeah.
Emma, thank you so much.
Thank you very
Apologies
much.
again for all of the technical dramas.